Vegan vanilla custard with a layer of cream wedged in between puff pastry dusted with powdered sugar. This soft and fluffy cake is a must-try.
Cremeschnitte would have to be one of my all-time favourite desserts. It's creamy, it melts in your mouth, and it makes you want to go back for more with every single bite. Now before we get started, I want to share with you a story. So back in 2015, when Michael and I, my husband, we were vegan for about 18 months at that point, we planned a trip to Europe. We were spending 8 weeks in Europe and I had this idea. I loved this cake that I used to eat growing up in Slovenia, and I didn't know if I could have a vegan version of it or not. So I decided to say to him, look, there's one thing that I want to have that's not vegan, and I hope that you can support me in this, and I really want to enjoy it. So he wasn't too satisfied with my decision, but he supported it nevertheless. We went to Europe, and there's this one part in Slovenia that's well known for making cremeschnitte, which is like bread. So we went to this cafe, I ordered a slice. I was very anxious because I had such high expectations, and it kind of made me feel like I had decided to be not vegan for this one cake, and it had a lot riding on it. So I think maybe those expectations, as well as the cake itself, I was very disappointed when I had it. And then when we went to Ljubljana, which is the capital of Slovenia, we went to a vegan cafe, and they so happened to have it on the menu. So I tried the vegan version and I was surprised that it was actually better than the real thing. And Michael absolutely loved it as well. But to test this theory, because we are vegans, we wanted to make sure that it wasn't just our vegan bias that made this cake so amazing. So I decided to take 2 of my mum's really close friends there, and they tried it as well, and they agreed that it was better than the real thing. So coming back to Australia, at this point we were planning to move to Slovenia at about a year ago even. And so once we realised that it's going to take us, for now we're going to stay in Australia, we moved to Tasmania. And I decided to take on the challenge to make my own vegan version of it. And I think I made about 5-6 versions until I was really happy with it, and I felt that it embodied the non-vegan traditional version of cremeschnitte. And this is what I'm going to be sharing with you today. If you want to hear more stories like this one, I've actually said this story on our podcast a couple of times before, The Minimalist Vegan. And now back to the recipe.
For the custard, add 500 ml of soy milk to a medium-sized saucepan and place on medium-high heat until the milk warms up. To a bowl, add 1 cup of cornstarch and 1 cup of raw sugar, 1/4 teaspoon of turmeric powder for the colour, and 1.5 tablespoons of vanilla extract. Add 1 cup of coconut cream, .500 ml of soy milk, but you can use whichever milk you have on hand. I just like using soy milk because it has a neutral flavour. Now whisk until it's well combined. Once the milk has come to a gentle simmer, pour in the custard mix and whisk.
So we just now need to stir this for about 5 to 6 minutes until it thickens up, or until you start to feel it stick to the bottom of the pan. You'll feel it as soon as it starts to happen. Then we lower the heat and continue to stir for another 2 minutes. If your arm starts to get a bit sore like mine after a while, you can find somebody else in the house to do a little bit of stirring for you. So once that's thickened up nicely, we just need to transfer it to a bigger bowl. I like to use one of my largest bowls so that it cools down much faster. So we're just going to transfer that in.
Set the bowl aside somewhere nice and cool in your house, stirring occasionally to disperse the heat. It will start to look a little lumpy, but don't worry, we will fix that later.
Before we get started on our cream, we need to preheat the oven to 200 degrees Celsius or 390 Fahrenheit.
Be mindful the time of year that you are making this dessert, as if it's warm, your coconut cream will be a little bit runnier like this one, and if it's cooler, it will be a little bit thicker like this. Pop it in the fridge if it is runnier, just overnight so that it sets. To a large bowl, add 3 cups of coconut cream, 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract, and 4 tablespoons of good quality maple syrup. This is the recipe that I use when I make my coconut whipped cream. I just normally do half, but because we are making a bigger dessert, I doubled it for this one. If you want to learn more, check out our detailed blog post in the link below. As we want the cream to be thinner, we just add 6 tablespoons of plant milk and then whisk it with a stand mixer or a handheld one until it's nice and creamy.
Now that the cream is done, we'll get on to the puff pastry layers. We're going to get our puff pastry into the oven. So I've just brushed the baking sheets with a little bit of oil. And we need to get the sheets, if I can only get them rolled out, but if you get it unrolled, make sure that whatever container that you're using, you roll it out to that size. And a little bit bigger because puff pastry tends to shrink a little bit once it's baked. So the baking dish that I'm using today is actually a spring form, so that once the cake has set, we can actually release it and you can see all those beautiful layers, and it's just easier to cut and get each slice out. So you can use something like this. So it's kind of relatively square shaped, or if you don't have something like this, just use whatever you have on hand. It might just be a little bit harder to scoop out with the spatula once it's set. So let's get started on forking the pastry.
I'm forking the pastry all over just to make sure that the puff pastry, once it's in the oven, doesn't rise too much. We want it to be a relatively flat surface. The second piece of pastry, we want to just cut into squares. I do it freehand because I don't want it to be too strict, but you can use a ruler if you like. You just glide it down, not fully to the bottom, but just halfway so that you have a marker for when you're actually going to cut it once it's baked. Place the trays in your preheated oven for about 10 to 15 minutes and rotate them halfway through if you're putting them both in to make sure that they bake nice and evenly. Once the custard is cooled, in a medium bowl add the strained aquafaba, which is just chickpea water, and use an electric whisk to whisk on low for a couple of minutes until you get a white fluffy peak. Increase the speed to medium and start adding a tablespoon of sugar every 30 seconds or so until it's all well combined. This is 3 tablespoons of powdered sugar all up. Increase the speed to high and whisk until you get a nice and stiff peak.
So we know when the aquafaba is ready is when you can tip it upside down and it doesn't fall out.
Remove the pastry from the oven once it's a nice golden colour. If your custard is lumpy, just give it a quick whisk to smooth it out. Now we're going to add in the whipped aquafaba. Fold in a 1/4 cup at a time, making sure to not overmix. We want this custard to be light and airy. This resembles whipped egg whites being added to an egg custard. Don't worry, you won't taste the chickpea water at all. Once the pastry is cooled, cut out the squares using the pre-existing lines. If they're still stuck a little bit together, just separate them a bit. Now we're ready to assemble. Place the forked puff pastry on the base of your springform pan, followed by the custard, spreading it out nice and evenly. Next up, we add on the whipped coconut cream, And finally, the puff pastry squares. Try your best to line them up with the puff pastry at the base, so when you cut out the outsides that they align well. Now you're ready to put it in the fridge to set. I recommend that you do it for at least 6 hours or preferably overnight. Once it's ready, you can pull it out and start to slice it. What we want to do next is trim around the outside just to release the set custard and cream from the spring form pan. The edge of the cremeschnitter for me is just cream and custard, as the puff pastry was a little small, so I'm trimming to cut it to the size. This is totally an optional step, but I like to have clean slices of cake. Cut the squares, making sure to get the bottom layer of pastry as well. The scraps can be eaten separately. I like to have them first before enjoying the sliced cake. I call this quality control. So if you want to impress someone and enjoy a melt-in-your-mouth decadent dessert, this vanilla custard and cream cake is a must-try. And no, you don't have to stop being vegan to experience it.
I hope that you love this vegan cremeschnitter as much as I do. If you do give it a try, please let me know in the comments. And as always, you can find this recipe in the description below or at theminimalistvegan.com. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. It always means a lot when you do. And until next time, happy cooking. Now that we've got... So now we're going to do our custard. No, we're not. As always, you can find the oh my God, I was doing so well. I hope that you love this vegan cremeschnitter.